All right, everybody be seated, please. You may proceed, Ms. Dugan.
Yes, sir. Just have a couple more questions for you on Brandy Peters before we move on to our next autopsy. So you said before we took a break that the main cause of death was the trauma to her head, and that she still would have been functioning or able to run after receiving all of these gunshots to her body, right?
Yes.
We saw that she had 2 gunshots to her head, one in the ear, one in the back of the head. Could these have stunned her or put her out for some period of time and then she be functioning or able to run again?
It's possible. I don't know how it would affect her. I mean, she is shot in the back of the head, so the bullet did strike her. It just wasn't with enough force to penetrate the bone, but I'm not sure. It may have dazed her.
Okay. And then you said, though, that after this trauma to her head that you showed us, she would not have been able to get away, run after that, after those blows to her head.
That's correct.
Okay. And looking at what's been admitted into evidence as State 70P, you were able to see this photo before court today, correct?
Yes, I have seen it.
All right. And after she received this trauma to her head, would she have immediately died or immediately been unconscious?
At some point, she would have lost consciousness. There were multiple injuries to her head. The final series of impacts to her face, I believe, were what happened at the end.
If she were beaten after sustaining these gunshot wounds, and she's unconscious here in the foyer, but her heart's still beating, would that explain the pool of blood around her or underneath her?
Yes, if her heart still would beat for a few minutes, her heart beating would have the blood pour out, but also she has multiple open defects of the scalp, which would also be oozing blood.
Okay. Can you give us a time of death?
I cannot, the official time of death was when she was found.
Right.
I cannot put a time on when all this occurred.
Okay. I guess the only thing that you were able to tell us was it occurred within a few hours of her last meal.
Yes.
Or with her, from her eating. And how would we determine a cause of death then? Would we have to look to other things like change in routine, when she was last known to be alive, those types of things?
Yes, for the time of death.
Okay.
We would generally start with when she was last known to be alive, and then other factors of when her routine would have changed, such as, if she uses her cell phone all the time, when did that stop? What they're wearing, were they ready for bed, or,
But that's not something that you can tell us from the actual autopsy.
Right, looking at their bodies, I can't determine and narrow it down a specific time of the injury having occurred.
Okay, thank you. All right, looking at 104A, what do we see here?
This is a photograph of Tamaya. This was how she was when I first saw her. So she was fully clothed.
Okay. And did you receive her body in an evidence bag the same way as Brandy's?
Yes, I did.
And what is she wearing when you received her body?
She had on this long sleeve shirt and black leggings.
Okay. Looking at 104B, what do we see here?
This is her lower body, so she also had sandals on.
And in 104C?
This is her identification photo. She's showing her face.
And in 104D?
This was documenting her teeth since the girls were twins, I just wanted to make sure we knew which one was which, so she did have these metal caps on her teeth.
And 104E.
This is showing her hand, the back of her right hand.
Okay, and then 104F.
This is showing the palmar surface, and when someone's in water or there's moisture on the skin after death, then we will see this change of the skin. So that's why the skin here is wrinkled, because she was in the water.
And then 104G.
This is just showing the back of her left hand.
And 104H.
This is showing the palmar surface of her left hand.
And what did you notice about her nails on her hand?
Just her nails were short.
I want to show you, before we get to the gunshot wound, I want to show you your body diagram you did in this case. States 133B. What do we see here?
This is, if you can slide it up a little bit, the bottom. Okay. This is showing she had a gunshot wound to her head. So this is a diagram of the skull, and so here is the entry that was in the back of the skull, and then it traveled through her cranial cavity and exited this part of her skull.
Okay. I'm looking at 133A. Where do we see the gunshot wound entry on this diagram?
I drew it right here on her head.
Did you notice any other injuries on Tamaya's body?
No.
Okay. Up here, I guess, did you note her skin wrinkling like you told us about, and her nails being very short?
Yes.
All right. What do we see in 104I?
This is a photograph of the back of her head. And it shows how her hair was styled in these braids, or little ponytails.
What about 104J?
This is a photograph showing the entry wound.
And 104K?
This is another photograph of the entry wound, and it's showing that there is actually stippling around that wound as well.
In the same way that we just saw photos of the inside of Brandy Peters' head, did you also do the same thing for Tamaya to try to show the path of this projectile?
Yes, I did.
Okay. What do we see in 104L?
This is a photograph that shows here where the entry is.
And in 104M?
Yes, and then where the wound exited. So it passed through the brain here, where the brain stem would be, which is a vital area of the brain.
And in 104N?
This has a probe showing the path that the bullet took through her head.
In 104O?
This is a photograph of the x-ray, and it shows the projectile that was recovered.
In 104P?
And this is a photograph of the projectile where it was situated.
104Q.
This is a photograph of the actual projectile after I removed it. And it says I recovered it from the left cheek.
And then 104R.
Just another view of the projectile.
Were you able to see any type of soot or stippling on Tamaya's gunshot wound to her head?
Yes, there is stippling here that you can see around the entry wound.
And so that would tell you that the gun was within a couple of feet from her head?
Yes.
Did you examine Tamaya Peters' stomach contents?
Yes, I did.
And what did you see?
I described it as tan flocculent with partially digested food. There was very little liquid. It was mainly food substance, and there was about, I'd say, 3/4 cup of stomach contents.
So you said very little liquid, so that means, I guess, more eating than drinking at her last meal, or less liquid than solid food?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And we're able to determine a cause of death for Tamaya Peters.
Yes,
And what was it?
she died from a gunshot wound to her head.
Right, I'm going to show you next the photos, 106A through I for Tamaya Peters' autopsy. And she and Tamaya were both, I believe, 6 years old at the time of their autopsies.
Yes.
What do we see in 106A?
This is Tanaya, her initial autopsy photograph, and she was clad in this outfit. You can see the wrinkling of her hand very prominent and some froth around her nose.
So she had wrinkling on her skin, much like Tamaya, but more wrinkling.
That's correct.
Okay. 106B, what do we see here?
This is just showing the lower part of her body, and she did not have any shoes on.
106C?
This is a photograph of her face, and it's showing this white froth from her nose.
Did you take a photo inside her mouth as you did Tamaya's?
Yes, I did. So this is showing her teeth, and she did not have the silver caps that her sister had.
What do we see in 106E?
This is a photograph of the back of her right hand.
And then 106F?
This is showing the palm of her right hand, showing the wrinkling.
In 106G?
This is the back of her left hand.
In 106H?
And this is the palmar surface of her left hand, showing the wrinkling.
And did you do an internal examination of Tanaya, much like you did for Brandy and Tamaya?
Yes.
Looking at 106I, what do we see here?
This is showing froth in her airway. She did not have any gunshot wounds, and so this was leading me to believe that she drowned, because when someone drowns, we can see this frothy material that's in her airway.
So you saw no gunshot wounds on her, no injuries on her, but the froth causes you to believe that she died of drowning?
Yes.
Okay. And did you determine a cause of death in this case?
Yes, I ruled the cause of death as drowning.
Okay. Did you also look at Tanaya's stomach contents?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and what did you see?
Hers was very similar to her sister's. It was about the same amount and partially digested food and minimal fluid.
Okay, so they had about the same amount and less fluid than solid content. So whenever they were eating, probably ate less liquid, more solid food.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And so since they're the same age, they're twins, they likely ate about the same thing at the same time, you would say?
It appears that way.
Okay. All right, finally I'm going to move on to the final autopsy. I'm going to show you the photos of Javante Segura. How old was he when you received his body?
He was 3.
What do we see in 108A?
This is his initial photograph, and all he was wearing were these pants and some underwear.
Okay. In 108B?
This is his identification photograph, and he also has some of the moisture around his nose.
108C?
This is showing the back of his right hand.
And in 108D?
And the palmar surface of his, where you can see the wrinkling of the fingers and his fingernails.
In 108E?
This is the back of his left hand, and there is a healing injury here on the ring finger, but that didn't happen at the time of his death. That was there previously.
So it doesn't appear, it appears consistent with being a previous injury?
Yes, it's healing.
Okay. And in 108F?
This is showing the palmar surface of his left hand.
And in 108G?
This is showing a photograph of his feet.
And his hands and feet have the wrinkling from being submerged in water, similar to his sister's?
Yes.
What do we see in 108H?
There was a small injury here by his eye, and again, it looked like it was healing.
Okay. Was it consistent with happening at the time of the incident, which would have been a day or two before these autopsies, or previous to that?
No, I think it was likely previous
Okay.
to the incident.
And in the same way for Tanaya, did you look in Javante's airway?
Yes.
Okay, what do we see in 108I?
This is showing the same type of frothy material in his airway that Tanaya had in hers.
Did you examine Javante's stomach contents?
Yes, I did.
And what did you see?
He had a smaller amount of food, but he also had some partially digested food in his stomach.
Okay. So a smaller amount than the girls?
Yes.
Back up here, because it's all the pictures I have. Have a couple more questions for you, though. Were you able to determine a cause of death for Javante Segura?
I ruled his cause of death drowning.
Drowning?
Drowning, yes.
Okay. And what does death by drowning involve?
Drowning is basically an asphyxial type death where an individual dies because they cannot get enough oxygen into their system.
Okay, so they're not getting enough oxygen to their brain?
That's correct.
Okay. How much time does it take for someone to drown?
I can't put a specific time on it, but if their head's underwater, there's a period they may hold their breath for a period of time, or they may not. And once they inhale and the water's in their lungs, they would not be conscious very long after that, and then they would go on to die.
Do you know about how long it would take them to go unconscious?
Probably within 10, 20 seconds or so.
So about 10 to 20 seconds before you go unconscious after you inhale the water?
Around that, or if someone holds their breath, then it would delay the time if their head's underwater of when they would lose consciousness.
Okay. And how long before they would die, before their heart stops beating?
The heart can continue to beat for minutes, and then it would finally stop.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Minutes.
And when you say minutes, like 2, 3 minutes, 10 minutes, how long are you talking?
It varies. It's hard to put a specific number on that. If someone drowned and then their body's removed from the water, then within a certain time frame, then there's a chance they could be resuscitated. But once they are never removed from the water, then they could go on to die.
So if after that 10 or 20 seconds they're unconscious and they're remaining in the water, then at that point, within minutes, they're going to die.
Yes.
Okay. Did any of these children have any other injuries besides what you told us about?
No.
Did they have defensive injuries of any kind?
None.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Cross.
Good morning, Dr. Flannagan.
Good morning.
I want to make sure that we're clear. You're not here opining as an expert in blood spatter, correct?
No, I have not testified on any blood spatter issues.
And you're not here testifying as an expert in scene reconstruction, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So you can't offer this jury an expert opinion that it was actually a gun that caused the wounds to the head of Miss Peters, correct?
Well, looking at her body, they are consistent with the gun. I can't exclude that some other object was used to create some of those injuries.
Exactly. So you're only able to say that the wounds sustained to the head of Miss Peters are consistent with an object like a gun.
Yes, that's correct.
What other objects are those wounds consistent with?
Well, looking at the depressed fractures, it would have to be some object that had a roughly round surface for where it would impact the head, and the other somewhat oblong. I can't think of a specific object that would have that shape.
Like the head of a bat?
No, I don't think it was a bat.
What about a ball-peen hammer?
The one, depending on the size of the hammer, the circle was somewhat big, so I can't say for sure for that.
I can't say for sure. And to be clear, you only considered the wound patterns of the head of Miss Peters. You didn't consider any type of, you didn't consider the scene, you didn't consider any spatter that would have been at the scene, correct?
As far as saying that it could be a gun causing the injuries to her head?
Correct.
Well, I'm saying that we know there's a gun present, and if someone is shooting at her, and
Right.
that's an object that is readily available, and there are depressed fractures that are consistent with it being a gun. But like I said, I can't exclude that at sometime during the attack, some other object was used.
Now let's go to the examination of Ms. Peters' hand. Okay. You stated that in your report, she sustained a fracture to her left middle finger.
Yes, I think she had fractures of the left middle finger and then the tip of the little finger, and then fractures of her middle finger and ring finger on the right side.
On the right side. And the fracture just means they were broken.
The bones broke, yes.
Correct. Now, you also stated in your report that the webbing between the left index and middle finger were torn.
Yes,
Okay. And that several of her acrylic nails were torn off, correct?
there were some didn't have acrylic nails, but ones that did have acrylic nails, there were some that were torn, yes.
Okay. And you determined that she was in a violent struggle.
Yes,
Okay. And that she did the best she could to save her own life.
yes,
Okay. Now, you stated on direct the defensive, or how you characterized her fighting, she put up her hands to maybe to protect her face.
yes, that's correct.
Okay. But you can't say whether or not she extended her hands when she was being attacked.
That's correct.
Okay. You also can't say whether or not she grabbed a hold to her attacker or her attackers, correct?
Yes, I don't know if she, at some point, held on to the attacker or not. I don't know.
Okay. But it's certainly possible, you would agree?
Yes,
Now, you also examined Ms. Peters' her fingernails, correct?
yes, it is.
Okay. And from your examination of her fingernails, you could see that she was wearing acrylic nails.
Yes, on some of them.
Okay. And you stated in your report that there was a visible gap between the acrylic nails and the base of her nail cuticle, correct?
Yes, they had grown out some.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You might.
Let the record reflect that I am showing you what has previously been pre-marked as defense exhibit.
Defense exhibit what?
Madam Clerk, what would this be? Thank you. Dr. Flannagan, what is this a picture of?
This is a photograph of one of her fingers. I believe it's a thumb, showing her nail.
Okay, and does this photograph, without showing it to the jury, does this photograph truly and accurately depict a picture of Ms. Brandy Peters' fingernail on November the 21st when you took the examination of her body?
Yes, this photograph was taken at the time of the autopsy.
And did you take this photograph?
If you got it from our office, yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to move this photo into evidence.
Is there any question? There's one of the autopsy photos. Ms. Peters. Okay, it'll be admitted.
May I publish to the jury, Your Honor?
You may.
Now, Dr. Flannagan, you stated that there is a visible gap between the acrylic nail and the nail cuticle of Ms. Peters, correct?
Right, I was describing this, that the nail had grown out, so there's a gap here.
Okay. And what does that indicate to you?
Just that she'd had the nails on for some period of time.
Okay. And that the acrylic nail had grown out some?
Her fingernail grew.
I'm sorry, yes. Okay. That's all the questions that I have, Your Honor.
All right, redirect. Any juror have a question of this witness? I'm sorry, you said none, right?
No, I do, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry,
I
I
do.
thought you said none. I'm sorry.
So as the medical examiner and as an expert in forensic pathology, I mean, it's your job to come into court and offer opinions about how injuries are sustained, right?
Yes,
Okay. And you said that these injuries could be caused by a gun because we know a gun was present. She was shot, right?
yes, she was shot.
Okay, and that a gun is an object that has multiple surfaces that could cause these different types of lacerations that she has on her head.
That's correct.
Okay, and you specifically showed us 2 of the fractures that are consistent with being from a butt of a gun.
Yes, the depressed fractures where I can actually see a shape of the offending object.
Okay, when you say a violent struggle, what do you mean by that?
Just the degree and severity of her injuries with her, involving her head and face, also her hands, and that she's been shot multiple times.
So she was getting beaten violently.
She was being beaten violently with
And
around
you
the head
said
and
that,
neck.
I'm sorry.
I mean, around the head and face.
Yes, ma'am. And that the injuries to her hands were consistent with her putting her hands over her head in defense of herself.
Yes, they are similar injuries as to what we see on her head.
And you said that her injuries are consistent with her hands being struck by an object, not her hands striking out at another person.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And you said that even if she were, or as far as extending her arms, did she have any injuries on her arms?
Not other than the gunshot wound.
Right. Did she have any trauma type injuries to her arms?
No, it's mainly on the hands.
Okay. So if she had extended her arm out to her attacker wasn't hitting her at that time on the arms to cause an injury.
I didn't see any contusions on her arms
Okay.
or lacerations.
And you said that even if she were to have been able to strike out or reach out at her attacker at some point, that doesn't automatically mean that that attacker would have injuries, right?
That's correct.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
All right, any juror have a question of this witness? All right, write your question down. We'll go sidebar. All right, you can step down, Dr. Flannagan. We can keep her subject to recall. Ms. Dugan, we're going to keep her subject to recall.
Yes, sir.
All right, call your next witness, please. And let me say that the questions have to relate to what this particular witness did. You know, once another witness is off the stand, we can't go back and ask her something some other witness did. You'd be subject to recall, Dr. Flannagan, but you're free to go about your business.
All right, thank you.
Call Vernon Henderson. Just
Okay.
a minute for evidence.
Come on up here, please. If you'd face the clerk and be sworn, please.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Have a seat. Slide up the rail, please, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Henderson. Can you introduce yourself to our jury and spell your name for our court reporter, please?
My name is Vernon Henderson. That's VernonHenderson, and I am a forensic specialist 2 and latent print examiner with the Tallahassee Police Department.
Thank you, sir. How long have you worked at TPD?
About 11 years.
Okay. And were you working in your same capacity there at TPD in November of 2010?
Yes, I was.
Did you respond to the morgue at TMH on November 21st, 2010?
Yes, I did.
Did you attend the autopsies of Tanaya Peters, and Javante Segura?
I did.
And did you collect some evidence from those autopsies of those 3 children?
I did.
All right, I want to turn your attention to the items there in front of you on the witness stand. Can you tell me what items 112, 113, and 114 are?
State's exhibit number 112 would be a buccal swab from Tamaya Peters.
Okay, and did you take that buccal swab?
Yes, I did.
How did you take the buccal swab?
The buccal swab is just a cotton swab that you go inside the cheek. It's just a dry swab, and you just swab inside the cheek.
And did you do that in the same manner for all 3 children?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And looking at 113, what is states 113?
That is a buccal swab from Tanaya Peters.
Okay, and what is states 114?
And that is a buccal swab of Javante Segura.
Do those appear to be in the same condition as when you impounded them?
Yes, they do, with the addition of the FDLE sticker.
Okay. And by stipulation, those are entered into evidence already. I want to turn your attention to other items that you collected during the autopsy. Did you collect clothing from the autopsies of these children?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us what Tamaya Peters was wearing?
Yes, I can, if I can refer to my notes.
You may.
Tamaya, with the M, had on a black plaid long sleeve shirt, black pants, red underwear, white sandals, and that is it.
And what about Tanaya? What was Tanaya wearing?
A sleeveless shirt with a strawberry print, pink shorts, white underwear, and that is it.
Okay, and what about Javante Segura? What was he wearing?
Gray pants and Spider-Man underwear.
Judge, may I retrieve our evidence?
Certainly.
Thank you. All right. Do you recognize states 105A through here?
Yes, that's the clothing from Tamaya.
And obviously it's been taken out of its packaging and repackaged for viewing purposes of the jury, but is this the clothing how you appear it to, the same as it appeared to look when you impounded it?
Yes.
Okay. By stipulation, this is already in evidence. Some questions for you on 107 and 109. Besides being repackaged for the purposes of viewing, do they appear to be in the same condition as when you impounded them?
Yes, with the addition of the FDLE sticker.
Okay. Oh, thank you. about one other item. Did you collect a projectile during the autopsy of Tamaya Peters?
Yes, I did.
And she would have been the child in the black jeans, black hooded sweatshirt, and white sandals?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you see it there in front of you on the witness stand?
Yes, I do.
And can you give us that state's exhibit number?
105B.
Okay. And 105B, that's the projectile that you recovered from her during the autopsy?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Or the projectile, I guess, that the medical examiner recovered?
Yes.
All right. And by stipulation, that's already in evidence. Did you also try to use an alternate light source during the autopsies of these children?
Yes, I did.
And what is that?
An alternate light source with just a different wavelength, and you're able to see things that the normal eye or with normal lighting you cannot see. And this particular situation, I was looking for bruising up under the skin, and on all three of the children, I had found none.
So with the alternate light source, that would allow you to see injuries or bruising under the skin that happened so recently it hadn't been able to show up yet to the...
That's correct.
Okay. And you said you were not able to find any?
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Cross. All right, any juror have a question of this witness? All right, write your question down, please. We'll go sidebar. Mr. Henderson, which autopsies did you attend?
Well, that was Tanaya Peters, and Javante Segura.
Okay, so you were not present at Brandy Peters' autopsy?
No, sir.
Okay, any follow-up?
I know that the children in this case didn't have any trauma wounds to them, but in general, if a person has a bloody wound on them, meaning that they have a wound on their body that they're bleeding from, do y'all typically swab around that wound?
It depends on what type of wound. In a gunshot wound, we would not.
Okay. And if it's their own blood there, would you suspect that it would be kind of saturated with their own DNA there? Would that be a place that you would swab?
No, ma'am.
Okay. That's all. Well, no to which question there? Can you explain what you mean?
If it's their own blood, I would not swab it.
So if they have a wound on them that they're actively bleeding from or have blood all over them from around the wound, that's not somewhere you would swab?
No.
Okay. And why not?
I had already gotten their buccal swab, which would have their DNA on it.
Okay. So that would be an area that you thought would be saturated with their own DNA from their own blood?
Right.
Okay, that's all.
Defense. All right. You can step down. We want to keep him subject to recall. All right. You need him for any reason, Mr. Brent? You're excused. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, sir.
Call your next witness, please.
This time, I'm going to ask you for lunch break to take care of the matter we have to do in front of court.
Okay, so a little earlier than I envisioned. Was there some problem with having another witness?
Your Honor, the next witness we anticipate being after lunch, so that we could in fact have the hearing. That person is in fact here and ready to go. That way we can start after lunch at the normal time.
Okay. No, let's go sidebar. All right, we have a legal matter that we need to resolve. I was hoping to get one more witness out of the way before we did that, but apparently they've run out of witnesses this morning, except for the legal matter we need to take care of. So we're gonna give you a little bit of a longer lunch break. I don't think we're goofing off. We've got some work to do, and there's no sense you sitting in the jury room while we take care of that. So I want you to be back and ready to go at 1 o'clock. Don't discuss the case with anyone. Don't let anyone discuss the case with you. Have a nice lunch. So, you want to take 5 minutes before we start into this?
Yes, sir, I'll be on my way down.
All right, we'll take 5 minutes.